$408 billion. That is how much food Americans throw away every year. Not because it went bad, not because it made anyone sick, because of a date printed on the package. A date that, in almost every case, was made up by the manufacturer, with no federal standard, no scientific formula, no legal requirement. There is no federal law in the United States requiring expiration dates on food. None. Zero. The only exception is infant formula. Everything else, every sell-by, best-by, use-by, best-before label you have ever seen on a carton of milk, a can of soup, a bag of chips, was put there voluntarily by the company that made it. And here is the part that matters. A man named Ralph Capone figured this out in 1933. Yes, that Capone family. Remember that name. Because in about 15 minutes, you are going to understand why the brother of the most famous gangster in American history accidentally created the system that now costs your family over $1,300 a year. You have seen these dates your entire life. You have thrown away food because of them. Your parents did it, their parents probably did it, and every single time, someone made money from that decision. So what do these dates actually mean? The USDA says it clearly. The sell-by date is not for you. It is an internal label for the store, telling the stock clerk when to rotate products on the shelf. It was never designed for the person buying the food. Best by does not mean the food is unsafe after that date. It means the manufacturer thinks the product is at peak quality until then. Peak quality, not safety. Your yogurt does not transform into poison at midnight. The use-by date is the closest thing to an actual safety label. But even that one is only federally regulated for infant formula. For everything else, it is just another suggestion. A researcher named Emily Broad Lieb at Harvard Law School spent years studying this. She founded the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic. In 2013, she co-authored the first comprehensive legal analysis of date labeling across all 50 states. What she found was a disaster. More than 50 different phrases are used on food labels in the United States. 50. Sell by, best by, use by, best before, best if used by, freshest before, enjoy by, guaranteed fresh until. Every manufacturer picks their own phrase, their own method, their own date, and there is no federal definition for any of them. Lieb said it plainly. The dates have nothing to do with safety. They are a manufacturer suggestion of peak quality. That is it. Your crackers are not contracting salmonella from the shelf, but 90% of Americans do not know this. A 2025 national survey by ReFed found that 88% of consumers throw away food because of these dates. 43% said they always or usually discard food near the printed date. That number went up from 37% in 2016. Read that again. The confusion is getting worse, not better. And it is not because people are stupid. It is because the system was designed to be confusing. The way dates get put on food is a business decision. The USDA says this explicitly. Shelf life end is a business decision made by the manufacturer. They choose the testing method. They choose the margin. They choose the phrase. And they consistently choose conservative dates, because a customer who throws away food too early is a customer who buys a replacement. A single average supermarket throws away $2,300 worth of food every single day. Products pulled from shelves because the date passed. Products that were still safe, still edible, still nutritious. And those empty shelf spots get filled with new product. New product that someone has to pay for. You know what happened next? The food industry recognized they had a problem. In 2016, the Grocery Manufacturers Association and the Food Marketing Institute launched a voluntary initiative. The plan was to simplify labels down to just two phrases: best if used by for quality, use by for safety, voluntary. No enforcement, no penalties, no requirement. Just a suggestion from the industry to the industry. And they knew. GMA and FMI admitted publicly in 2017 that 50 different date label phrases were confusing consumers. They acknowledged it. They said they were fixing it. By 2025, the confusion had actually increased. 43% of people always throwing food away near the date, up from 37% when the voluntary program launched. Their own solution made things worse. But here is where we go deeper, because the cost goes far beyond money. 60 million tons of food end up in American landfills every year. That food decomposes and produces methane. 58% of the methane coming off municipal landfills in the United States comes from food waste. Methane is 80 times more powerful than carbon dioxide over a 20-year horizon. Your kitchen trash can is feeding the climate crisis, and a meaningful chunk of it is food that was never actually bad. ReFed estimates that 20% of avoidable household food waste is directly caused by date label confusion. That is $7 billion a year. 3 billion pounds of perfectly good food in the garbage because of a printed date that nobody regulated. That was 2016. It is still happening right now. Now let me take you back, because this system did not appear out of nowhere. In 1809, a French confectioner named Nicolas Appert invented food canning. For the first time in history, food could be preserved for years. No dates needed, no labels, the food kept. How long did it keep? In 1865, a steamboat called the Bertrand sank in the Missouri River. Among its cargo were canned goods, peaches, oysters, tomatoes, honey, vegetables. That cargo sat at the bottom of the river for over a century. In 1974, chemists from the National Food Processors Association tested those cans. 109 years underwater. No harmful microbes. The food was safe. The appearance had changed. The vitamins had degraded, but it would not have made you sick. Canned food from the Civil War era passed safety testing in the 1970s. And yet today, you throw away a can of beans because it says best by March 2026. The United States military has known this for decades. MRE field rations, the meals soldiers carry into combat, have an official shelf life of 3 years at room temperature. But at cooler storage temperatures, the Army has confirmed safety out to 10 years. And the way they determine when an MRE goes bad is not through lab tests for bacteria. They taste it. The military decides shelf life based on flavor, because the food does not become dangerous, it just stops tasting as good. That is the same principle behind every best buy date in your pantry. Quality, not safety. Flavor, not contamination. For most of the 20th century, food manufacturers used coded dates, strings of numbers and letters only the store could read. Consumers had no idea what they meant, and that was the point. The dates were for inventory management, not for you. Then, in the 1970s, consumer activists figured out how to crack the codes. They demanded transparency. They wanted to know when their food was made and how long it would last. The push for open dating, dates the consumer could actually read, became a national movement. In 1973, the USDA and FDA held joint hearings on food labeling. A USDA study that same year surveyed over 1,300 shoppers and found 94% of them were already looking at dates on products. The demand was real, and this is where Ralph Capone enters the story. In 1932, Ralph Capone, brother of Al, along with a partner named Murray Humphreys, bought Meadowmore Dairies in Chicago. The following year, 1933, Ralph lobbied the Chicago City Council to pass a law requiring expiration dates on milk. The mob wanted dates on milk. The commonly told version is that this was about public health, about children getting sick from spoiled milk. The reality is murkier. Snopes rates the claim that Al Capone created expiration dates as unproven. But what is documented is that Ralph Capone pushed for milk dating in Chicago, and the idea spread. It spread because it made sense for dairy, which actually does spoil and can actually make you sick. Milk is one of the few products where a date label serves a genuine safety function, but the system did not stay limited to milk. Through the 1970s, state after state passed its own dating laws. No coordination, no federal standard. Each state decided its own rules, its own phrases, its own products. By the end of the decade, you had a patchwork of 30-plus different state laws using different terminology for different products with different requirements. and the federal government did nothing. Two agencies share jurisdiction over food. The FDA handles most products. The USDA handles meat, poultry, and eggs. Neither one set a standard. The responsibility fell into the gap between them, and no one picked it up. In 1979, the Office of Technology Assessment conducted a study for the Senate. Their conclusion was devastating. There was no evidence that open dating improved food freshness or safety. The dates were performative. They made consumers feel informed without actually informing them. You know what happened after that? Nothing. No federal law was passed. No standard was created. The system just kept growing, getting more complex, more confusing, more profitable. And they knew. The industry knew the dates were causing waste. They knew consumers were misinterpreting them, and they watched the money come in. Because every time you throw away a half-full container of sour cream that was still perfectly fine, you go back to the store and buy another one. Every time a supermarket pulls a product from the shelf 3 days before its arbitrary date, that shelf space gets refilled with fresh inventory at full price. The Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic estimated that $900 million worth of food gets removed from supply chains every year because it passed a date that had no legal meaning. Nearly $1 billion in edible food discarded. Dana Gunders, a scientist at NRDC, published a report called Wasted in 2012. She found that Americans were losing 40% of their food supply from farm to landfill. The dollar figure at the time was $165 billion per year. Gunders said it directly. These dates are just suggestions for peak quality. You might still have days, weeks, or even months before the food is actually bad, and every attempt to fix the system has been killed. Representative Shelley Pingree from Maine and Representative Dan Newhouse from Washington have introduced the Food Date Labeling Act at least 6 times: 2019, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2025. Senator Richard Blumenthal joined as a sponsor. Senator Rick Scott signed on in 2025. Bipartisan support, simple legislation. Standardize the labels, reduce the waste, save families money. 6 times. Not once has it passed. Blumenthal said it on the record. Items at the grocery store are stamped with a jumble of arbitrary food date labels that are not based on safety or science. A sitting senator said the dates are arbitrary and not based on science, and the bill still failed. 6 times. You know who asked for the delays? In December 2024, the National Association of Manufacturers wrote to the incoming Trump administration. They asked them to make food labeling requirements, and I am quoting the spirit of the request here, more flexible, and to postpone implementation by at least 3 years. The industry does not want this fixed. In 2024, the USDA and FDA finally opened a formal request for information on standardizing date labels. They received 9,800 comments from the public. The vast majority demanded mandatory standardization, real rules, real definitions, actual accountability. And that's just one company, because the manufacturers are only one piece. The retailers benefit from faster product turnover. The packaging companies sell more packages when food cycles through faster. The entire supply chain profits from you throwing away food that would have been fine for another week. The average American family of 4 wastes between $1,300 and $1,600 a year on food they throw away. Multiply that across 130 million households, and you begin to understand the scale. Supermarkets alone lose $15 billion a year in unsold fruits and vegetables. Much of that produce was still perfectly safe to eat. It was pulled because a date said so, or because it sat too close to a date that a customer would see and reject. Harvard's Food Law and Policy Clinic calculated that standardizing date labels nationwide could save 398,000 tons of food per year. The economic benefit would be $1.8 billion. The math is not complicated. The politics are. But you already know this part, or at least you think you do. The real trap is not the label. The real trap is that even after hearing all of this, you will still throw away food because of the date. Your mother taught you to check the date. Your partner checks the date. When you open the fridge and see something past the printed date, something in your gut says no. That feeling is not rational. It is cultural. It is a reflex trained into you by decades of a system that benefits from your fear. Restaurants throw away massive quantities of food before the date even arrives, because serving anything close to the printed date feels like a liability. Grocery stores pull products days early for the same reason. Food banks have historically rejected donations of perfectly safe food because the date had passed. The fear is so embedded that knowing the truth does not fix it. You can understand intellectually that your peanut butter is fine 2 months after the best buy date. You can know that honey literally never expires, that archaeologists found edible honey in Egyptian tombs 3,000 years old. You can know that canned goods from 1865 passed lab tests in 1974. And you will still hesitate. 39% of Americans say they understand what the dates mean. They are wrong. In surveys, the majority cannot correctly distinguish between a quality label and a safety label. They think best by means unsafe after. They think sell by was put there for them. The labels were never designed to communicate what people think they communicate. Because the system does not need you to believe in the date. It just needs you to doubt the food. 1 second of hesitation, 1 moment of wondering if maybe this time it really is bad, and the food goes in the trash. That is the cultural escape. You cannot opt out of a fear that everyone around you shares. Your coworker smells the milk and makes a face. Your kid refuses to eat the yogurt because it says yesterday. The social pressure reinforces the label, and the label reinforces the social pressure. That was 1933. It is still happening right now. The United Kingdom figured this out. In 2022, Waitrose removed best before dates from nearly 500 fresh products. Morrison's dropped use-by dates from 90% of their own brand milk and told customers to use the sniff test. Marks & Spencer removed best before labels from over 300 varieties of fruits and vegetables. The country that invented sell-by dates is now removing them. The country that built this system is dismantling it because they measured the waste and decided it was indefensible. In America, we are still waiting. California became the first state to act. Governor Gavin Newsom signed AB 660 in September 2024. Starting July 2026, sell-by dates for consumers are banned on food packages sold in California. Only 2 phrases will be allowed. Best if used by for quality, used by for safety. 1 state out of 50. And it took until 2026. Meanwhile, the Federal Food Date Labeling Act sits in Congress for the 6th time. The same bill, the same sponsors, the same common sense solution, and the same industry lobby making sure it never reaches a vote. Emily Broad-Leib has spent over a decade pushing for reform. She built the legal framework. She wrote the analysis. She testified before Congress. She told them exactly what the data showed and exactly how to fix it. You know what happened to the voluntary industry initiative she helped inspire? The GMA and FMI program launched in 2016. They projected that 98% of products would switch to the standardized labels by 2020. By 2025, consumer confusion had increased. The voluntary approach failed by every measurable metric, and the food industry still points to it as evidence that mandatory legislation is unnecessary. Shelley Pingree introduced her bill for the 6th time in 2025. Bipartisan, backed by data, backed by consumer groups, backed by environmental organizations. It is sitting in committee. The dates are still on your food. The confusion is still growing. 43% of you are still throwing away perfectly good food every time you glance at a label. And somewhere, a manufacturer is printing a new date on a new package, using whatever phrase they feel like, based on whatever internal test they chose, with whatever conservative margin protects their bottom line. No one regulates it. No one enforces it. No one is accountable for the $408 billion that ends up in the landfill every year. The people who profit from this system are still profiting. The trade associations are still lobbying. The bills are still dying in committee. And tomorrow morning, you are going to open your refrigerator, check a date, and throw something away.